This is Chris, the Idaho Painter. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint laser straight lines on a rough wall or a rough surface. So stay tuned for this video where I teach you this simple little painting hack. So making a laser straight line on your wall or on your trim where it meets the wall is a very simple process, and we're going to be using, you can use just Frogtape. And Frogtape, when paint actually begins to bleed through the tape under the surface, it has a product that actually swells and stops the bleeding and will give you straight lines. We've had really good luck with Frogtape on smooth surfaces like glass and metal, but when you're dealing with a wall and anything rough, it's a good idea to use this method that we're actually using to assure that you get a laser straight line. And we're going to be using, you can either use Frogtape or masking tape, but we typically like to ensure an ultra laser straight line. We like to use just Frogtape and the caulking. So I'm going to begin the process by showing you on this wall our laser straight line, and we're going to just put some Frogtape on this wall right here. So I'm just gonna, so just for instance, if this was gonna be, we're gonna be doing a stripe on this wall, I've got my tape on there, and now with Frogtape I can go over this and I can paint it now, and you're gonna get a fairly straight line, a lot better than you're gonna get just using straight masking tape because of that technology the Frogtape has in it where it actually swells. But to ensure that it's completely sealed, this is where the caulking comes in play. And now we're gonna use our clear caulking to go over this. So I'm gonna show you this step now. This is where the secret of getting a laser straight line comes into play. So we got our Frogtape on the wall here, and for instance, this could be a stripe in a bedroom, or this could be your trim where it meets the wall. But say if we're trying to make a laser straight line in a kid's bedroom, now I'm going to be painting this side. This is where my wall color is going to stay, but I'm going to be painting this side. So I'm going to take and just put a nice small bead of caulking right over where this edge of my tape is, my Frogtape. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to wipe off, and I'm going to just push it down and wipe off all this excess. And what you're actually doing is pushing that clear caulking and smearing it right along the edge of your Frogtape right here to actually add an additional seal to that Frogtape. And part of this, the key of this process is to not let that clear caulking dry before you paint it. You're going to want to paint over that before it dries, and then the next very key step is to actually pull your tape before the paint dries or the caulking dries. Because if you leave it set on there and the paint dries, what happens if you're using a satin paint, the paint is going to bridge from the tape to the wall, and when you go to peel off your tape, you could pull off some of the actual paint and it's going to leave a jagged line. So the key steps to this is to smear on the clear caulking and try to get all of it off. All you want is just that edge sealed right there, and get all the excess of that caulking off. Just wipe it on a wet rag. I like to actually use a wet rag, wipe the excess caulking that I have on a wet rag, and then begin the painting process. And don't do too much caulking if you're doing a whole lot of area or a lot of lines or a lot of trim. If you do too much and the caulking dries before you get to painting it, then the process isn't going to work. So now while my caulking is still wet, I'm going to begin the painting process. And when I'm actually doing painting over the tape, I don't actually like to roll over it. I like to actually use a brush, because a brush isn't going to push it underneath the tape either or force it underneath the tape. I just brush over the top of it and just going to cruise right along, brushing over the top of this. Make sure it's completely covered, 100%. And then you're gonna pull your tape off. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. I'll pull my tape off right here. And there's my laser straight line right there. And this is, you can't see it in the video, but this is a orange peel textured wall. So it's a pretty rough wall, and there you have a straight line. And one of the key things is that clear caulking, and some of the clear caulking may bleed underneath the tape, but since it's clear, you'll see it, it's gonna be white, but it actually dries clear. So it goes underneath the parts of the tape that's raised that can't seal itself over this rough surface. So that's another key element to this whole caulking process, is using clear caulking. Here's a closer look of the actual line I just painted. It's still wet, but you can see the roughness to the wall, and yet that line is still laser sharp. So when it comes to actually doing your trim and getting laser straight lines on your trim, the process is exactly the same. I'm just going to take my frog tape, I'm going to run a line on my baseboard right here, and one of the keys to this step right here is any existing paint that is actually on to your trim or your baseboard, you want to make sure you leave that exposed so it'll get painted over so you have a nice straight line. So I'm just going to run my frog tape along my trim right here. So I got my frog tape down. Want to make sure you press it down really good. Now I'm going to take my clear caulking, just put a really small bead. You don't need a whole lot. You just want just enough that's actually going to seal that tape. And then I'm going to run my finger along that, wiping up all the caulking off there. And once you're wiping it off and it's actually pressing it down into the tape right there. And once again, it's good to just have a wet sponge or wet rag to wipe your hands onto. Now, before the caulking dries, one of the key things before the caulking dries is to do your painting. I'm going to just sit here and paint on my trim. So you can't do too much to get ahead of yourself too much, because once again, do not let that caulking dry and do not let the paint dry before you peel off your masking. So I typically like to do, if I'm doing a whole bedroom, I'll do 2 walls at a time. I'll run, if I'm doing my trim, run the masking around 2 walls of the trim, caulk it, paint it, and then move on to the next 2 walls. But now, before it dries, just gonna pull off my masking, and there I have it, a laser straight line, and I'll give you a close-up look at that. So there's a close-up look of my line on my baseboards right there, and that's exactly how you get a perfectly straight line on your baseboards. So once again, just to go over just getting these laser straight lines, you have a couple options. You can use the frog tape. That's the foolproof method, frog tape and clear caulking. The frog tape is extremely expensive. It's typically over $5 a roll. This painter's masking tape that we use right here is approximately $1 a roll to $1.20 a roll. So it's going to save you a lot of money. We've had a lot of success actually just using this tape and clear caulking and pulling it off and having laser straight lines. But if you want to guarantee yourself those straight lines on really rough surfaces, the frog tape is even just a little bit more assurance. But either way, it's going to give you a good straight line.